Hey guys, welcome back to Meghan Grace DIY. Today's tutorial, we're going to cover how to make a hand sanitizer keychain holder. This little guy is super simple to make. I used less than a quarter yard of fabric, and you can make it for yourself or for all your loved ones. I think it's important to note I used a 2" by 4" travel hand sanitizer bottle, which I did finally find in my apartment, by the way. But there are many other different shapes out there, so you can alter the pattern to fit whatever shape bottle you have. Here's our pattern and our materials. Like I said, this is the hand sanitizer bottle that I'm using as the example to base the pattern on. And this is the pattern sheet that I've attached in the description below that has both the pattern for the body of the hand sanitizer holder and the little strap that goes at the bottom. One thing I want to note is that this thing is 11 inches long. I'm going to hold up my ruler to show you. And 11 inches is the length of a piece of printer paper. So a lot of times the blue is going to get cut off a little bit at the end. Go ahead, cut the whole strip and leave the white pieces at the ends. You can find the link to the pattern in the description section below. You have to click on show more and that's when it'll show up. But if you really can't find it, just email me and I'll send you a copy. I've cut 2 pieces of almost a heavier weight canvas-like cotton for this project, and I figured I'd give a shout out to all of you dog lovers out there by using a dog print today. You could most certainly use a regular weight cotton. I would recommend interfacing it though if you plan to use that type. And this little piece here will be to make our strap on the bottom. And then you're also going to need a lobster clip. I chose to go in gold. You're going to need a snap to close the holder. And I'm going to put a fake button on the front. You don't have to do that. That's just for decoration. And lastly, I need a piece of 1 to 1.5 inch wide elastic. And with your machine prepped and all threaded, you're ready to go. I've taken the smaller piece and I've pressed it in half and then pressed it in at 1/4 inch, so the entire width should be about 1/4 inch wide. Please ignore my naked nails in this video. I'm getting my first mani-pedi tomorrow since everything closed down, and I figured I'd take my red polish off in advance, but I still feel like they look a little scary. I'm sewing this tie all the way to the right edge to sew the 2 folds closed. And this is what the final product should look like. If you ever struggle making rolled ties, I have a separate video that instructs you on how to do that. Our first step needed to be sewing the tie because we're going to pin it to the main body of the holder before sewing everything together. If you take a look at the pattern piece I provided you, I've marked where your elastic should be pinned, which I'm pinning right now, and where the tie is going to be pinned, which is where your lobster clasp will go. Since the elastic is cut slightly wider than the body of the holder, you're going to get a little bump when you go ahead and pin down the other side of it. That's okay if you have that bump. You need a little bit extra so that way you'll be able to easily fit the bottle of hand sanitizer into the caddy. As you can see here, I'm sliding the lobster clasp onto our tie, and then I'm going to line it up with the mark on my pattern and pin it in place. If you're asking why I don't have the white edges on my pattern, it's because I'm working with the original, not one that I printed off of my printer. With both of these items pinned in place, it's not going to lay flat anymore. You're going to have a little bump where the elastic is and a little bump where your lobster clasp is. That's okay. We're going to push the bulkiness to the middle when we go to put the other piece of the body on top. If it makes it easier for you, I also stay stitched down the elastic and the strap so I didn't have to worry about those pins while I was sewing the body together. Let's move on to pinning both the front and the back of the body together. As you can see, I've laid them down with the right sides touching each other, and I'm putting pins where I think I'll need them to sew up the body, across the top, and down the body. See there? My lobster clasp was getting a little sneaky and wanting to creep out to the right, so I pushed it back to the center to make sure it doesn't cause any problems when I'm sewing around the edges. I'm starting at the top of the body, sewing down the right-hand side of the panel, past the elastic, past the strap, and I'm going to go ahead and reach the bottom. We're going to do a special thing when we get to the bottom corner called blunting. Blunting is when you stop about 3/8 of an inch before you hit the bottom. You're going to sink your needle, you're going to lift the foot and rotate 45 degrees. So 2 stitches, lift the foot, and then continue across the bottom. We're going to sew the bottom and do the same thing at the other corner. Believe it or not, this helps your corners be sharper than if you just turned and didn't do any diagonal stitches at all. With your corners achieved, you're going to sew right back up the other side, but we're not going to close the top. That's how we're going to flip this guy inside out. We've basically just created a tube. So we're going to flip this guy inside out. And I know there's many methods to flip things inside out in an easier way, but since this is pretty wide, I'm just going to do it with my fingers. I also made sure that my corners were pushed out as sharp as possible. At this point, I've taken the piece over to the iron and pressed it nice and flat. Notice how the elastic ends up on one side and the strap with the lobster clasp ends up on the other side. Now we're going to move on to what I think is the trickiest part of this tutorial, which is creating the hole for the top of the hand sanitizer. We're going to create this hole almost the same as we would do a buttonhole. I've made one size on the pattern, but I want you to double check your bottle of hand sanitizer before marking your hole. A great tip is my hole is actually the same size as a penny, so I'm going to use that to mark my hole on my actual caddy. You want to make your hole slightly smaller than the top of your hand sanitizer bottle, since it's going to stretch out a little bit with time. Using my penny and some tailor chalk, I'm going to mark around the penny to mark my hole, but when I go to sew, I'm actually going to sew just inside the mark that I made. I have a small confession to make here. Most costume designers don't create a lot of buttonholes. In fact, we take a lot of time taking buttonholes out of garments because it makes it a lot slower for an actor to do a quick change backstage. So far more times have I closed buttonholes and put snaps behind them than I've actually created buttonholes. So basically I'm saying it's not really my strong point, and please bear with me if it's not the most perfect looking buttonhole you've ever seen. On my machine, I'm going to turn to a zigzag stitch, and then I'm going to turn the length all the way down between 1 and 0, which that little zigzaggy mark means buttonhole. And then I'm also going to turn the width to a 2. Okay, here we go. We're going to do a buttonhole stitch in that circle that I traced around my penny. Keep an eye on your markings, and about every 5 or 6 stitches, you're going to sink the needle and turn just a little bit to make sure you're still on your circle. We're going to keep going all the way around, and just another reminder to stay slightly inside the mark you made. You want the first time that you put this hole over the top of your hand sanitizer bottle to be a little bit tight. Like I said, it's going to stretch, so you want to make sure that it's not going to be all stretched out a month from now. And there we go, just about all finished. I'm going to take it off the machine, clip my threads, and hey, not so bad for a girl who doesn't like buttonholes. I'm resetting my sewing machine to a width of 4 and a length of about 2.25 to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch across the top and open end of the body of our caddy. Here we are, almost at the finish line, just a few more steps to go. I'm going to use a pair of nail clippers to cut the inside hole out from the buttonhole I just created. When cutting small spaces like this, I like to use a pair of nail scissors just because it gives me better precision and they're often very sharp. I can make sure I get nice and close to that zigzagged edge without cutting through it. With the circle all cut out, we're going to give a test run on top of our bottle of hand sanitizer. See, like I said, it's a little tight, it's a little hard to get on, but it's going to stretch over time. With the unfinished end of our body, we're going to fold it like a triangle. One end in and then the other end down. Let's take the triangle over to the sewing machine and do some top stitching to hold it in place. We're going to sew an entire triangle, and I like to sew on a contrast thread, especially since it's easier for you guys to see, but if you want to sew it in a thread that matches your project, that's perfectly okay. With the top stitching of our triangle completed, let's now pay some attention to the strap with the lobster clasp. See, it's got quite a bit of room to move here, so we're going to tack it down where we'd like it to sit. It could be all the way to one side, so your caddy hangs diagonally, or we could tack it in the middle, so your caddy hangs central. I'm choosing central, so I'm going to put 2 tacks in that strap, both a 1/2 inch from the outside edges. Hopefully you can see here with the tacks in place, my lobster clasp stays central, doesn't crunch the fabric, and will help my hand sanitizer hang evenly. Now we're finally done with the machine and we're moving on to our hand sewing steps. What I've decided to do is take a gold button and sew it on the outside, and it's basically a fake button. It's there for decoration. I didn't want to add in an additional buttonhole, but if you want to make this a buttonhole closure, be my guest, you rock on with your buttonholes. I am, however, sewing the button on first because underneath that button is going to be a snap, and it's a lot harder to sew the button on after the snap is applied than before. I'm going to speed up through this part a bit, but if you need additional help on how to properly hand sew on a button with a shank, I have an additional video in my Back to Basics series that will help you out. On the opposing side to the button, we're going to hand sew the male side of the snap. Again, I'm going to speed up through this a bit, but if you need additional help on how to properly attach a snap, I have a Back to Basics video for that. Our female side of the snap is going to go down at the end next to the strap with the lobster clasp. Again, I'm going to sew this in place. I'm using a contrast thread just so you guys can see how I'm sewing. I give each hole about 3 to 4 stitches with a knot before I move on to the next hole. When you finish sewing your snap in place, you can congratulate yourself because your hand sanitizer keychain holder is done. Now let's give her a test drive. I'm sliding my hand sanitizer into the elastic first, and then I'm going to take the hole and place it over the top of the hand sanitizer second. Then I'm folding the 2 free halves to meet each other, and I'm going to close the snap. As you can see, the gold clasp and the gold button add a really nice touch of professionalism to this project. I hope your project came out just as adorable as mine did, and now you have hand sanitizer on hand anytime you need it. Thanks again for stopping by Meghan Grace DIY. I really hope you found this tutorial to be informative, entertaining, and easy to follow. The best way you can help my channel grow and help me get more great content out to you is to subscribe, like, share, and tell your friends about my channel. I also just hit 3,333 subscribers, so I'll be announcing the winners to the giveaway of that contest very soon. If you have any questions or suggestions for tutorials, please feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And as always, happy sewing, everybody!